this very important opening keynote panel discussion, Is There a Culture War Against Populism? It's a very important theme that runs throughout the festival this year to look at issues around the debates on populism, because it's obviously something that's concerning many people in society. This is part of the Time to Talk series internationally, as well as being part of the Battle of Ideas. So Time to Talk, who are the international partners for the festival, have got a series of events that are happening throughout Europe called Understanding the Populist Turn, the X-Debate supported by the Open Society Initiative for Europe. And actually this event is being live streamed as we speak, so just be aware of the fact you're on camera. Not that you would be doing anything that you wouldn't want to be seen, but you might be seen throughout Europe as we speak. But anyway, so we're being live streamed, so hello everybody who's watching us on the live stream. I'm Claire Fox and I'm the director of the Institute of Ideas. I think that when we were conceiving of this festival, one of the things that we realised was that a lot of words these days are difficult to pin down their exact meaning in quite an atmosphere of political change. So at any one time, I can't decide whether I should boast about being a liberal or actually, I often use being a liberal as an insult, for example. So that's just one word that's kind of like, what does a liberal mean? And populism similarly falls into that category. We've actually got a strand of debates tomorrow about the corruption of political language. But when you hear the term populist, or it's often used now to, in a kind of slightly menacing way, with a hint of demagogy and sort of insidious suggestion that when voters defy the kind of governing classes, that somehow this is kind of driven by racist and xenophobic, or rather vulgar or ill-informed or ill-educated ideas. And lots of people now talk about populism as though it's a very scary concept. And I think that what we want to explore in this discussion was whether that has some merit or not. There are obviously changes happening, the growth of parties that are described as populist, some of which we might be excited about, and some of which we might be very frightened by. And so that's kind of what we want to dig a little bit deeper into. And there's obviously lots of international examples of things changing, everything from the recent German elections, the Czech elections, things that are happening in Austria, where people are really nervous that the kind of populist turn is leading to some sort of frightening emergence of kind of 1930s type totalitarianism and populist leaders like Hitler, all sorts of things. So we want to go beyond the headlines here and really try and kind of get to grips with what's going on. So we've got, I think, three very important thinkers and writers to kind of help dig us a bit deeper. I'll introduce them in the order in which they'll speak. Professor Frank Furedi, who's a sociologist and social commentator. He's the author of numerous books, but we particularly want to concentrate on his latest book, which is Populism and the European Culture Wars, the Conflicts and Values Between Hungary and the EU. A very fine book indeed, in my opinion, looking at how the EU establishment has succeeded in distorting the true meaning of populism in his view, and the principle of national sovereignty, but he'll explain it far better than I did. Frank is a prolific writer, public intellectual who speaks internationally, and an advisor to the Institute of Ideas more generally. So he's going to give us his thoughts. Next up, we're going to be hearing from David Goodhart, who's eating his bacon sandwich, who's also the head of demography at Policy Exchange. He's the former founder and editor of Prospects magazine, who are actually one of our media partners, and was director of Demos. He's significantly, for this discussion, he's the author of The Road to Somewhere, The Populist Revolt and the Future of Politics. It's become a hugely influential book. I think when I read it, actually before it was published, but when I read it, I couldn't get over how prescient it was. And I think everybody read he actually described, because it was kind of coming out just as Brexit was happening, but of course he'd been writing it long before, and he'd anticipated a lot of the things which I think we saw from before in relation to Brexit. He describes two different groups increasingly pitted against each other. The people from somewhere, rooted in specific place and community, with a roots-based conception of national identity and respect for tradition and so on, and the end of anywheres, cosmopolitan, well-heeled, footloose, often university educated. You can decide where you fit in relation to that now. But it got, just to indicate how influential the book was, we actually had to go to David to know this, and I don't want to over-flash him because he is, again, an ego, this man. But anyway, but we had to go through all the blurbs for the sessions, because so many blurbs had mentioned in David Goodhart's The Road to Somewhere that it actually felt like the whole festival was about David's book, so we had to kind of remove him so that it didn't kind of look like everything was different. But I think that is a sign of an influential book, so we're delighted to have it. And then it's Ellen Shafat, who I've been keen to get to speak at the Battle of Ideas for many years. It's her debut, obviously. She's a well-known international political commentator and an activist, TED Global speaker, a founding member of the European Council on Foreign Relations, DCFR, a member of the Reform Global Agenda Council on Creative Economy in Davos. She's published 15 books, maybe best known for some of us as a novelist, because 10 of her books have been novels. She's the most widely read author in Turkey, and her books have been published in 48 languages. She writes in English and Turkish. Her best-selling novels, The Battle of Istanbul and 40 Rules of Love, many of you will have read, and her most recent book, Three Daughters of Eve, which is brilliant and you should all read. All of these books are obviously in the bookshop. I think that Ellen is probably more concerned about the rise of populism, and certainly with the backdrop of what's happening in Turkey, you can say that just saying, oh well, populism is being misinterpreted, and there are obviously some fairly reactionary forces that appear to have been unleashed in the present populist wave. So can we give a warm welcome to all of our For those of you who haven't been to the Battle of Ideas before, just a word on the format. The speakers are asked to speak for quite a short time. They've got slightly longer today, kind of 8 or 9 minutes very generously. Most of the panels it's only 5 minutes. And after they've kind of given their introductions, although we might have a short exchange on the platform, really we're having a public conversation. And I'll go out to the audience, take 4 or 5 contributions to the floor. You don't just have to ask questions. You can actually make points, join in the conversation. And we call these public conversations. So as you're listening, think of the kind of things that you want to interact with the speakers about, and then we'll keep coming back to the panel and so on and so forth. Okay, to kick us off then, Frank.
Thank you very much, Claire. I think this is a very interesting and important topic, if for no other reason than it's far from evident what populism means. I've never yet met a single person in Europe who calls themselves a populist. I travel around quite a bit. I know, for example, the country where I was born, Hungary, is meant to have a populist government. If you look at the government itself, there would have been a time when they would have been called a conservative authoritarian or a conservative Christian Democratic Party, but certainly not populist. And they themselves use the word Bulgarian, which in Bulgarian means bourgeois, as a way of describing themselves. So the very idea they're populist is weird, because they are self-consciously anti-populist in terms of the genuine meaning of the term. But I'm not really surprised that they're using the word populist in such a promiscuous way to describe everything that the cultural elites in Europe don't like. And I think the reason for that is very simple, is that people who tend to be influential in the media, in the dominant institution of society, are often the ones that define the language that we speak. And people that haven't got a voice, or haven't got access to newspaper editorials, are often the ones that are described, and they are the ones that get labeled in a particular way. And you want to have some context. I think it's useful to always remember that back in ancient times, when political theory was developed, when the Greek oligarchy realized that there was a real aspiration for democracy, they developed anti-democratic theory a long time before we had any idea what democracy really meant. And I think we think something very similar today. I think the attacks upon movements from below are very much anticipatory, and they basically are attempting to hegemonize the ideological and the political space whereby anything we don't like, and anything we don't like basically means the values that contradict our own become ipso facto populist. So in effect, in the language of the mainstream, and the mainstream commentators, populism is really a euphemism for xenophobia, extreme nationalism, right-wing authority, and anything that is really horrible in this world. That's populism. That's the kind of portmanteau into which it's put. I think there's a silent cultural war against populism. It's silent because it's inchoate and it's not really a conscious political project, but it basically expresses, it very much symbolizes the fact that for the first time since the end of the Second World War, for the first time since the end of the Cold War, the traditional establishment feels that the basic values that they have bought into are being sort of challenged. And I think that's really what the whole business is all about. And when you have sort of arguments and the denunciation of populist movements occurring, they usually develop around four main themes. There are four main themes that are driving the anti-populist sort of impulse. I think the first one, and what they really don't like about movements such as the Brexit people or some of the other movements, is that they still have an identification with the national past. I think that anything that in some shape or form, anything good to say about the past is, by today's culture at least, dismissed as being weird and horrible. When you talk about the 19th century, the Victorian era, and that's boo-boo for the Victorian era, you forget about the fact that that's the end of slavery, that's the development of science, industrial revolution. All we think of is just child labor and terrible things in the 19th century. So anything to live in the past is really horrible. And it was really brought home to me in a speech that David Cameron gave as the full Prime Minister. But on several occasions in that speech, he kept talking about the bad old days. He talked about the bad old days of racism, the bad old days of that. And it occurred to me that here's a conservative Prime Minister. And there used to be a time when conservatives actually wanted to conserve something. That was part of the deal. Whereas now, you want to flee away from the bad old days and rediscover yourself in the future. And I think that kind of reaction to the past is really important. In the EU, you have a situation where the European Union actually prides itself in what I call a year zero history. So European history begins in 1945, and anything before that is just Auschwitz and more Auschwitz and all that kind of stuff. So I think that there is that kind of estrangement from the past is really critically important. And given the fact that some of these movements use historical symbols, speak the language of their historical culture, they are seen as being negative and represent something very bad. The second important area where anti-populism feels that they need to kind of make extend is tradition. And by tradition, I just don't mean traditional values. Anything that's traditional from the past. So, the idea that there are still people who like a traditional marriage, sort of extremely conventional, anything that's conventional is seen as, by definition, somehow, sort of to be criticized, not up to date. You have criticism being made about traditional customs of all sorts, and tradition itself almost has a negative connotation to it. And the very fact that a lot of people in Europe actually feel that tradition gives them a sense of who they are, that they express their humanity through the traditional symbols and through the traditional ethos and even religion that they kind of grew up with, and cultivate their children accordingly, is seen as in some shape or form one that contradicts a more modern, a more progressive, a more kind of sort of balanced way of being. The second thing that populism is kind of decried for, and arguably probably the most important, is national consciousness. I think in Europe, you're allowed to have any identity you want. Every identity that goes, sort of in ethnic identity, cultural identity, gender identity, that's cool. You can call that. Except for one identity, which is pathologized, and that's national identity. Because the minute you claim national identity in any form, it becomes immediately an object of either ridicule or what you're told that nationalism is really the beginning of the super word nationalism. There's this kind of simplistic notion that if you have a national feeling, a national consciousness, fairly soon you're on the road to crystal mass. And before you know it, the barbarity of the national experience gets kind of reproduced. All while forgetting that actually there is no historical link between national feeling and nationalism, and that kind of causality has been established in the question of reading history backward. And we're now getting to the point where in the old days there used to be a clear distinction between civil nationalism, ethnic nationalism, and patriotism. There's all these different variations that educated people understood that there were certain forms of national consciousness that on balance were all right. They weren't necessarily all chauvinistic, xenophobic sort of movements. So I think that element, that has gone completely. And finally, I think sovereignty. I think that you'll find that the anti-populist impulse is hostile to sovereignty. I think that's the main battleground. Sovereignty in two forms. National sovereignty, where the nation's right to determine its own future is decried because anti-populist sentiments are cosmopolitan by nature. They prefer international civil society. They prefer international institutions. In other words, they prefer non-democratic institutions that are not accountable to people over national ones. Because the thing about national sovereignty, whatever you think of it, is that for better or worse, people in a national parliament become accountable to the people that elected them. I cannot hold sort of the EU commissioner to account. I cannot hold people in the World Health Organization to account. I cannot hold people in the United Nations to account. They have this, what they call international civil society, where they really have their own mates club, like an expert mates club, where they kind of become accountable to themselves. So national sovereignty is bitterly seen as retrograde, as something that you need to fight against. But even more importantly, I think this is something I feel very strongly about, they hate popular sovereignty. They really think that popular sovereignty, by which is traditionally seen as underpinning democracy. In other words, it basically means that the people make decisions that affect their future. It's not really an effective, and it's not really an enlightened way of making decisions. I think they saw that in the referendum of Brexit, where people were being lectured as being too thick and too stupid to make decisions about their future. They always thought it's so complex. The issues are beyond your capabilities. But how do you imagine that in the right way? And they repeat the old argument of the Greek oligarchy, I guess the demos, when they said, how can we have a situation where we have experts who build ships, experts who build houses, but yet we allow anybody to be a political expert and have the right to vote? That's really not all. And that's more or less what is being said. It's kind of hostility to popular sovereignty. So basically, the battleground is there's three areas of struggle. There is, first of all, an attempt to denationalize identity. I think anti-populist men want to denationalize identity, and it refers to diversity. I mean, diversity, or maybe I get a chance to later on talk about it, is always counterpoint to the identity of the nation. Secondly, they like to outsource decision-making to international non-democratic bodies, and therefore they counterpose their cosmopolitan imagination to that of the one that is bounded by borders. And finally, they prefer the expert to the demos. Given the fact that I have a family where I haven't got time to go into that, but that's a very interesting area to look into, because we have to establish for ourselves what is, from a genuine democratic point of view, the right balance to be struck between expertise and popular sovereignty. Well, that's one of the key questions of our time.
Okay, very useful and interesting start there, Frank, and also raises some of the questions that we can discuss on the panel and with the audience afterwards. But for now, David.
Well, thank you. Some flattering introduction. Yes, I mean, the argument about populism sort of is the cultural war. Although I would agree with Frank that hardly anybody actually self-identifies as populist in this argument. But the way I see it, much of populism double liberalism has dominated our politics, not just from class, but something like George Osborne is sort of representative of the fusion of these two liberalisms, completely dominated our culture, our politics, our policies. I'll go through the list in a minute, but I think much of it is a legitimate against that domination, although some of it is clearly illegitimate. And I think one of the, we talk a huge amount about populism, we very rarely hear any attempt to disentangle, as it were, legitimate populism from what I think decent populism is. Something like conflict and interpret, obviously I don't. Decent populism from illegitimate populism. It really is. There are section 5, about 7% of our population who are genuinely authoritarian and democratic. One might see the distinction between the DNP and UKIP. People might argue about whether UKIP is legitimate populist or not, but I think a huge amount of energy is expended in this debate. I very rarely heard an interesting attempt to define the difference between the different people. Anyway, I guess I've tried to do that not through my book that I've just written. Now mentioned wrote somewhere in which I talk about the value divide in society, sharper in recent decades, is the underlying cause of Brexit here, Trump in America. I think I've written a blog where I say not necessarily like about distinction between people anywhere who are not just the about 20-25% of the population, this here. Although when you try to divide someone to deeply into all categories, but the people from anywhere tend to be highly educated and mobile, particularly through this country, this university. I was in London at that too, so and people with that kind of background tend to value the things you expect them to value, openness, autonomy, sort of change comfortably. They tend not to have very strong root attachment because they have been so mobile in their lives. And on the other hand, you have those people from somewhere who I estimate, by the way, although I prefer to be labelled as a value group, they really are there. Surveys. You have to interrogate surveys to come to roughly these percentages or about half of the population are usually described somewhere less well educated, more rooted in security and reality. They have much stronger group attachments than anyone is. And they have lost, hugely lost political and cultural ground. Go back 50, 60 years, British conversation essentially was somewhat in a sense. There was a 5-10% of the population that were anyway, so huge disproportionate information in them. They kind of knew their place, and they don't know it. And this is, I think, one of the problems. There's a lack of emotional intelligence on the part of anywhere. They're not aware of their own domination in the public domain. Now, I mean, this distinction sounds very simplistic and binary, and really binary to describe. But obviously, there are huge shades of variation within anywhere, coming somewhere, and maybe between a group, like population. And I think the other important thing to remember is that both these are the two loosely defined dominant worldviews in our society. And both of them, of course, are completely legitimate, at least in their own opinions. Both of them are completely legitimate. But they are in certain functions, what we call certain obstacles in their right problem. Also, just in parentheses, I get a very useful way of looking at this distinction, using the language, not my language, but the language of the American sociologist Peter Parsons. Some of you will screw off through chemistry text or tone in functional sociology, one of the foreign sociologists but he did come up with a very useful distinction between talking about human identities between achieve and ascribe. So I think that invented, partly down to maybe young ones, more or less in universities, more or less decent professional careers. So your sense of yourself comes from what you achieve in life. Your identity is therefore much more porous and portable than getting anything. Whereas if your sense of yourself comes from, predominantly comes from your root, your place, then it attach those things and those things change, it can be very discomforting. I think that's the word. Anyway, I mean, I think the main thing I want to say today is that I would say what we come to call populism, I would call this populism, a mainstream somewhere priorities are what quite recently would have been called centrism. If you think of, and just go through a list of things, desire to live in relatively stable communities, desire to have your country relatively secure borders, moderate levels of immigration rather than mass migration, decent training and employment opportunities for non-graduates, and incremental improvements in living standards, putting the rights of national citizens before universal rights or the rights of non-citizens, something that is illegal by the European non-discrimination rules. All of those things, not very long ago would have been seen completely mainstream. But now, in some ways, these very basic things are regarded as kind of populism. So I would say that populism is actually centrism. It is the centrism of not very long ago. And it is, and a reaction against a set of political priorities that has in some ways set their face against those priorities. So let me just very quickly read you my list of my description anyway of what I should just think of all of those things here. It's in the economy, we call it the knowledge economy, the economy that works for people who are highly educated. Meanwhile, much of the rest of society is battling with the so-called the hourglass labour market, because there's hot, highly skilled, highly productive, often highly paid, few jobs in the middle of the public sector, and there's not much number of jobs to learn how to do it right now. You've seen a huge shift in favour of cognitive ability. Cognitive ability has become the kind of gold standard human evaluation of that society. Very damaging ways. Both cause and consequence to the rise of higher education, the huge expansion of higher education. We don't go that, and I don't want that over-romanticise the skilled manual jobs of manufacturing, but nonetheless there's something more special about those jobs. You used to do those jobs even if you didn't have high level of qualification, even if you had a high level of qualification. What you did do those jobs well was a lot of experience. You didn't get to do those jobs well until you'd done them for 2, 3, 4 years. So that provided protection, that provided sort of status protection for those jobs. So somebody that was a good do that job. So you've seen a huge increase in the importance of that. Ability, of course, it's a huge amount of economic business after 30 years of WTO globalization, European integration, improvement, as well as the lawyers, much less huge bias against private realm family policy in Britain, essentially, for both parents and children to spend as little time as possible in the family. And that's a huge number of also problems with social care, the housing crisis, the rise of depression, those that you do with the decline of the private realm, the technocratic state, Frank talked about, huge areas that were taken out of politics. The Bank of England, 20 years ago, the Bank of England made independent. We've had a huge increase in judicial activism, human rights activism, human rights legislation, and so on. And all that EU legislation touches on that topic. Now, the thing about it, you might end of democratic conflict, renewing fact that you can bet your bottom dollar that those things will be decided according to the interests and priorities and situations for the anywhere, not somewhere today. That is what has happened. It has given elites options, and the anywhere more elites, but it has given the elites a sense of great control, and it's given non-elites a sense of loss, a sense of loss of sovereignty.
Thank you very much, Dan. Again, loads of very rich material there that we can come back on and try and develop, but very useful to follow on. But Ella, your thoughts, please.
Hi, I'm a storyteller, and I want to start with the little story. In Turkey, in the Black Sea region, there's a little town called Sinop, and this is a place where ancient Greek philosopher Diogenes lived. And we have a statue there. And Diogenes, as you know, is regarded as the father of the cosmopolitan thought, the cosmopolitan ideal. And every year we have a mob of Turkish nationalists going to this statue to take it down and asking why do we have a statue of a Greek philosopher in the middle of a Turkish town. And I think this little example tells us so much about this conflict, this ongoing conflict between tribalism, nationalism, and the other cosmopolitan idea. I wanted to start with this example because all these ideas or ideas that we're talking about might sound very abstract, but for us, for those of us who come from countries like Turkey, we've seen them on the ground, we've seen them in daily life, and especially when you go through the experience of the Balkans, Anatolia, Middle East, you start to question the very notion of nationalism in different ways. We have seen how nationalism divides people, we've seen how nationalism does create more and more bloodshed. So when nationalism is used in a more positive sense, there's a part of me that's extremely downside because we've seen the practice of nationalism all around throughout history, and we have not forgotten that history. But I want to take you a little bit back, not very far, in the early 2000s. You might remember there was so much optimism in the academia and media. You will remember reading so many articles predicting that the liberal order was going to experience an amazing universal triumph, and history would always move forward. You will remember there was so much confidence in that liberal order. And in a way, there was a dualistic way of reading world order, right? As if it was a dualistic geography. Some parts of the world were regarded as liquid lands. They were volatile, they were unsettled, choppy waters, not yet settled. And some other parts of the world, mostly the West, were regarded as safe, stable, and steady. So feminism, activism, human rights, these were things that were called the liquid lands, not necessarily the solid lands, because the solid lands were thought to be beyond that stage. And I think the reason why we had one of the main reasons why we feel is because this notion, this dualistic notion of geography has been shuffled. In the year 2016, with Brexit, with trans-election, with, yes, I will use that word, populist movements from the Philippines all the way to Austria, one after another, we have seen the very similar patterns. Now we know that actually no place is that solid. In no place we can take democracy for granted in that way. And in fact, as the late Zygmunt Bauman had warned us long ago, we're all living in liquid times. And that's why we're all connected. I want to talk about the realities because I think they matter so much. Yes, perhaps if you ask Marina Grant, she will call herself that she has done this. In many interviews, she calls herself a Democrat. But that doesn't mean that she is a Democrat. Trump uses the word very fine people for people who go to charity, the supremacist ideas. That doesn't mean they're very fine people. We have to see the underlying ideologies that are like echoes of one another. In some countries, they're more visible, like in Turkey. In some countries, a bit less visible, but they're there, like in Hungary and Poland. And in some other countries, Britain has experienced a surge in crisis-driven countries like Greece, but also in relatively quite wealthy countries like Sweden. So how do we connect this? And I think they are connected, there are similarities, and we need to pay more attention. One of the things that populist discourse, because it is a discourse that does, is to create its own image, is to create its own duality. Populist demagogues need an other all the time. And one of the biggest dualities that we are being fed constantly is this duality between the real people and the elite. I want to question that. What exactly is the elite? No one can convince you that Marine Le Pen himself is not part of it, or Keith Wilders is not part of it, or Trump himself is not part of the financial elite. But their success is in presenting themselves as if they were not part of this establishment, as if they have been zoomed from another planet and therefore they completely free. There is no such thing. What we are experiencing is a shift between us. Yes, let's be critical of elitism, but let's also understand that this is also a different view of the world. And secondly, in my opinion, we're very cautious about this over-romanticization of the world, of the real people. This is a dangerous road that does, yes, go all the way back to nationalism and tribalism. This idea that the real people are so pure and innocent that whatever they decide about us is the right decision can go in ways that is dangerous separations. And also it feeds into an anti-intellectual, anti-knowledge discourse. We live in an age in which information can very easily replace knowledge. And no one has but they are. I don't want to fight now. I think emotions are incredibly important. Cultural clashes are incredibly important. Someone who used to claim there is a clash between civilizations. That is not true. But there is a clash within nations, a clash of cultures, a clash of perceptions. We need to pay more attention to emotions. And I think ours is the age of anxiety, of fear of the other, fear of. And it would be a tremendous mistake to belittle these emotions. And this, in my opinion, is one of the many mistakes that many youth have made throughout the decades. We might not feel the same emotions, but it's the big mistake to belittle them. And I think many people, rightly so, have anxiety about the future of their children, if their children will have the same job opportunities. Yes, I'm a liberal. I'm a foreigner myself, but I understand the fear of the other. I understand the anxiety about immigration, about cultural change. And I think these portrays it. It is not okay to be led about it. And I might think countries have made the worst mistakes in their history when they let themselves to be guided by fear. And unfortunately, we live in an age in which populist demagogues do exploit these fears. When we look at them, all these extremists might be completely disconnected. An Islamist preacher somewhere, supremacist racists somewhere, but they are connected. And they feed each other, and they need each other. They all thrive upon this climate of fear. In my opinion, they have entered in a new age in which citizens' initiatives, bottom-up movements are going to be much more important than ever. Countries like Turkey, what we have experienced in Turkey, our example has shown the world the fragility of democracy. How do you deal with the kind of movements that come from within democracy, use the means of democracy, and once they consolidate their power, use that power in order to suppress all other voices of dissent? And this is the danger of democracy, because it comes from within the democracy. It also shows us that none of us can take democracy for granted. It's a very delicate ecosystem. So the ballot box in itself is not enough to sustain democracy. If we don't have a robust civil society, actively involved citizens, if we don't have rule of law, separation of powers, and yes, definitely free media, independent media, and women's rights, and minority rights, without all these components, the ballot box in itself will not be enough to sustain a democracy. it will move towards majoritarianism, and from majoritarianism to authoritarianism is the very short step. So I just want to finish by saying, I think so much is going to depend on all of us. This bottom-up movements, questioning, I think we have entered an age in which global solidarity, global activism, and global systems will become much more significant and urgent than ever.
Okay. Thanks, Ellen. And that's obviously a kind of real challenge, both in different ways to things that Frank and David said, as I knew it would be, an important one too. But I'm just going to quickly grab a couple of responses from the three of you, very quick before I go actually. But Frank, one thing I wanted to ask you, and I suppose it does relate to things that Alex said, is historically maybe you would have been more associated with being international and kind of singing the, and kind of might have had some reservations about nationalism and some of the kind of fears around chauvinism and unleashing, that this clash of values that you describe so well in your book, but that could it unleash some of the kind of more dangerous forces? And also, if you look at what's happening in Spain at the moment with Catalonia, people on the television this morning saying this is kind of exactly in line with Brexit, people wanting to kind of, rebel against the censor and so on and so forth. Should we feel queasy? How do you feel about that and the kind of shift that you've seen in relation to that?
Well, I mean, historically, nationalism, some forms of nationalism, have been very dangerous and destructive. And so today, there are certain forms of xenophobic political movements that are obviously potentially a threat. But the world that I see, it's almost as if we live in a parallel universe. Because one of the most interesting things for me is that nationalism in Europe is specific. What you do have is identity politics in these countries being relatively strong. And I think it's very interesting that when nationalism is strong in Europe, then it's usually all right because it's Catalan nationalism. And they're not like these bad boys in France or in Austria. So that's cool. Or you have Lombardy nationalism, again, the nationalism of the rich, or Basque nationalism. I mean, these are the areas where you have, proper old school nationalist movement in a separatist form. But what I find quite astoundingly interesting is that when you go around, if you think, you have a sense of history, the flag waving that we know in the 19th century, in the war period, there's nothing like it. There are this small number of fascist right-wing movements, but they are very, very small and very, very insignificant. And I think there's a fantasy that's being developed when there's this incredible. It's almost like you just like Hitler. I mean, they always say just like Hitler, just like Nazis. Every time there's something uncomfortable, we kind of revisit the 30s and imagine that's happening now. And I think that kind of politics means that the real, the people that are really practicing the politics of fear, it's not just Trump, and he loves that really well, but the people who are promoting fear of populism. I think it's interesting, there's a kind of spontaneous double standard that creeps in. I'm against the politics of fear. Well, we are saying, I'm against the politics of fear of Trump. But my politics of fear about the majoritarian threat or about the ballot box on its own, that's cool, that's really all right. So that's a liberal politics of fear somehow. I think we do need to have a wake-up call and realize that in the real world, there is an uncomfortable political situation where both sides in the extreme are essentially drawing on the same political resource, which is the emotional fear, but they don't recognize it. They only see the other side as doing it, and they being accomplices to precisely the kind of politics. And the way that I explain to my students is that when Trump says build that wall, we know exactly what he's saying and can criticize it. But when students on campuses say, let's have a safe space, which is another way of saying build that wall, that's okay. You don't recognize it as having anything in common with those two dynamics.
Okay, Alex. So, are you cultivating the project there yourself without realizing it?
This is exactly, I think, what we need to be careful about. We are constantly being pulled towards dichotomies. Are you pro-Trump or are you pro-safe spaces? anti-creative emotions. And it's very, very dangerous because everywhere in the media, when you turn on your TV, everybody, even in academia, where atmospheric is supposed to be managed, we are very used to seeing a core-something speaker situated against something speaker, and we want that to crush and crush. And what we're losing is the nuance, and nuance breaking. So yes, I am critical of Trump, and I am also critical of state policy, which I'm really, really in my speech. But my point is, let's not be that confident about nationalism not being an issue in the European continent. I am not that sure. As we travel across Europe, we will come across very different lifestyles, very different existences, all within the umbrella of Europe. And then you see that Europe, what Europe looks like in Brussels can be very different from not only, I'm not talking about different countries, even within the same country, like in Austria, on the countryside and the major cities. Perhaps we have entered a new stage in which conventional politics is no more between left and right. We have new structures now, and one of those structures is in the countryside and the urban space. And this is a pattern that we see in England, across continental Europe, and many other parts of the world. There was a very interesting Pew Research survey published in 2016 all across European countries. And the question people were asking in very different forms was about diversity. And the answers were quite alarming because a very big number of people across Europe said, because of diversity, my country became a much worse place to live. And especially in 8 countries, this amount, the percentage of people who say, no, I'm not fond of diversity, I'm not fond of cosmopolitanism, I want a more monolithic function. People who said that, the percentage of people answering in that way, in 8 European countries, alarmingly high. So, and we can mention other research. So it's not really for granted that we are over that stage.
Well, and yeah, I disagree, I think. Well, I think we've got to make distinctions here. And I think you're putting into the same box lots of different influences and tendencies, and indeed lots of different political emotions. Obviously, the Islamists, the white supremacists, the ethnic and sectarians are beyond the pale. But I think most of the inspiration behind what we said with populist movements is decent populist. But by which I mean, they are people who broadly accept great liberalisation gospel, certainly in English democracy, great liberalisation in the last 40 years, so on race, on gender, on sexuality, but they are not liberals. They still also are strongly attached to states. They're often strongly attached to their own groups. It is possible, and I think we now have a situation in which you have a very, very strong, you feel more comfortable living in an area where people like you predominate, and you are discomforted by rapid change. That is legitimate. That doesn't turn you into some kind of group. The group attachment is also compatible with, we see it every day, also compatible with individual rights, minority rights, and so on. That is the decent populism that I think we need to distinguish from the really, obviously, bad, like I said, the white supremacists and so on. And most mainstream populism in Europe does not make any challenge to the liberal foundations of European civilization. And that populism in Europe is actually extraordinarily ineffective. There's been no reduction in large-scale immigration. The refugee crisis in 2015, the most famous response was that of Angela Merkel. Bring it on. Obviously, that soured, particularly in Eastern Europe, to put it mildly. But the European Union has not reversed integration. It could prevent Cameron to prevent Brexit happening. I mean, where is the evidence of this great populist upsurge that is undermining liberalism in Europe?
Okay, right. So I'm gonna go out to the audience. And one of the things I just wanted to draw attention to as well, just in terms of untangling things, is because Alex, you make the point, there are actually people who are anti-diversity and cosmopolitanism, but even that is a kind of very odd. I hate most diversity policies. I'll tell you now, and I'm about to share a panel after this. But I don't like diversity policies, and I voted Brexit. And people make an assumption that if you voted Brexit, therefore you are a little Englander, and so on and so forth, that you're xenophobic. So the difficulty we have is, what is it, if you say, I find it worrying that people said this in a survey, the problem is that you don't know what they were saying. That's the point I'm trying to make. They might have been saying, I don't like that way of understanding the world. It doesn't mean that they're people to be worried about. Well, there are people worried about me, of course, but I mean, yeah, let me, I was abusing my position. I'll come back to the panel quite quickly. There's loads of hands in the air. Okay, so I'm going to start with this lady here, and I've got a little flurry down here, and then I'll go to the back. So, this lady here, start, please.
I think is that really? Thank you very much, all of you. I've got to say that I totally identify with what you said, Mr. Murray, and I thought at last you were something absolutely sensible. I voted for Brexit, and one thing that I noticed was, oh, sorry.
Yeah, oh, sorry. Standing count, although, feel free, despite that, don't interrupt, because we'll never get anywhere. Right, carry on.
What I feel really about people who name populism, which I think is just a term of abuse by the sort of liberal left-wing elite, I feel that it's bullying, and I want to really talk about bullying. And I feel that this, the constant criticism or denigration that anybody who voted for Brexit or anybody who might think that Trump is absolutely all bad is the new bullying class. And I've never really, all the people who have, whenever it's brought up in conversation, I find that the most amount of hatred is on the left side of things, on this anti-populism thing. I'm very worried about that.
Okay, thank you very much. So, yes, I'm going along. Gentlemen there, green there, and then I'll go back.
I suppose it was the opposite to that one. If you're coming from the other end of the spectrum, you are, I guess, an elitist system in a way. How exactly do you find the impulse to say, I do resist something, I am part of this minority, I am against perhaps the more moderate expression of nationalism, for example, if you take over the borders, you take over the free trade, etc., it becomes very tempting to say, yeah, fine, I reject democracy. Is it worth and how exactly like that beyond saying, well, we can do some small things at a civil level, etc. But if you are to track down of nation politics, because, for example, we have return to national on one side, because there's different on the other side, is there much to say to that?
Okay, thank you. And then at the end there.
My question is to the panel. Anyone can answer this. What would you say to the criticism that the cosmopolitan stance is actually an anti-diversity stance? Because what the cosmopolitan does is they go to different countries and they don't want to meet anybody who's representative or who's typical of the populations in those countries. They want to meet other liberals. And when they want people from those countries coming to Britain, what they mean is they want people who are either liberal, who can easily assimilate into a liberal culture. So actually, cosmopolitanism is a plea for less diversity rather than more diversity.
Okay, thank you. So I've got a couple of people here. Then I'm going to bring the panel. Then I'm going to start at the back, and I haven't not seen you. So, yeah.
David, you discussed describe the number of views as legitimate and others as illegitimate. So when you were talking about the anyways, you said they had legitimate views, and I agree with you. Then when you talked about the some ways, you said that there's this core of authoritarians, 6 or 7%, who have illegitimate views. They might be racist, they might be xenophobic, and so on and so forth. I would question whether any view is illegitimate. It might be wrong, but it's not illegitimate. The reason why I say that is that we have the answer to all of these problems is democracy. And that means we have to respect everyone's point of view, and we have to engage. We have to recognise that anyone, even an authoritarian, or someone with very backward views, has the ability to understand, to listen, to reason, and to change their point of view. And I don't just think this is a slip of the tongue, I think it's a rather important point, because the anyways, it seems to me, are always trying to curtail debate by saying that so many views are beyond the pale. They are not open for debate, and that's the fundamental problem. I sort of have a concern that you're addressing this problem through anywhere spectrum.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. No, yeah.
Thank you. Related to that, on Elif's point about nuance and a lot of these issues being about fear, I think there isn't any nuance on the anywhere side, as they describe it, the anywhere, because they define boundaries, they define discussions, and then they define the results of you being on the wrong side. So take something like gay marriage. There are many people who couldn't care less whether people are gay or not. It's not fear, you describe fear with the other. Many people couldn't care less what your sexuality is. But at the same time, they would rather like to keep the traditional marriage and the traditional way of relating to each other. So that they defines their culture and their sense of place. So, but the lack of nuance you're talking about, people have defined this in such a way that if you are against gay marriage, you are therefore homophobic. They've taken the kind of the two-step process. The same thing could be said about Brexit. People say it fails the movement, if you're voting to leave, you are therefore xenophobic. You are therefore scared of the other, or therefore scared of bringing people into Britain. There's no nuance there. And to reduce the whole thing to fear is to miss out. I think the big problem is that people don't have a vehicle for expressing their views, so we end up with this very blunt measure of trying to understand what people think, because there is no other way for them to express their views.
Okay, interesting points on the floor, and I'll come back out and try and capture some more. Let me start. David, you kick off. Keep it brief and snappy.
Yeah. Well, I really like coming back to ideas on a few places I haven't come to in the attack too different. You may have a point. I mean, I'm just thinking about the word legitimate and illegitimate. I mean, clearly, people who are advocating going around killing homosexuals or Jews, that surely is wrong. There are certain views that are illegitimate, and perhaps I've been drawing the definition to. Well, yeah, there is a distinction between a sin and a crime. I think it's a number of views that you disapprove of, or that if they became mainstream would reduce society to living, but they are not necessarily inadmissible. That they should be, as you say, defeated in argument. One should trust the sentiments of the majority. The majority is overwhelmingly decent, I would say. But just briefly on the paradox of cosmopolitanism is, of course, the fact that cosmopolitans require the existence of strong, continuing national cultures. Cosmopolitanism is about fitting from culture to national culture to national culture to national culture, and enjoying the differences of the world. But that requires there to be differences. That requires there to be national cultures. You can flip the two. This is the great paradox of cosmopolitanism. It's not actually anti-national at all. It depends, it sustains itself on national identity. And just to finally, the moderate, the alternative to moderate nationalism is not a world of cosmopolitanism and liberal nationalism. It is extreme nationalism. If you suppress, as I think the European Union has done, if you suppress moderate nationalism, you end up with golden wool.
Okay, thanks. Alan.
I think I have to clarify one thing. I did not say that everything can be reduced to fear. What I'm trying to say is we live in an age in which emotions are very important, and collective sentiments guide and misguide politics. And I think therefore we have to pay more attention to emotions. In most of the academic debates and the debates in media, there's a lot of attention on economy, on financial factors, but not enough analysis on emotions. And in my opinion, we need to increase our emotional intelligence to understand the world today. So it is a world in which anxieties, apprehensions, fears, concerns about lots of things become important in our political decisions. Now, just to give you an example to clarify, I think Hillary Clinton made a massive mistake when, throughout her campaign, she called half of Trump's voters a basket of deplorables. You will remember. You might be critical of Trump's policies or rhetoric, but it is something completely different to say that everyone who votes for Trump is an Islamophobe or is a xenophobe. It is something completely different to say everyone who voted for Brexit is a xenophobe. I am not saying such a thing at all. Actually, I'm very critical of many liberal elite members who are looking down upon those emotions and making a big generalization. But what I'm saying is, our biggest challenge is to connect with people's emotions. If we can't do that, we suppress these emotions, we will be pushing them more and more towards the left of the far right, because that is the only space where they can voice those concerns without being belittled. So biggest challenge, and I think was one of the questions, how do you connect people from completely different echo chambers? And it's a question for all of us, no matter what our political views might be. How do we communicate with people who vote differently, think differently? How do we bridge these cognitive gaps? Because those cognitive gaps do matter, those cultural gaps do matter. So in a nutshell, of course, voting for Brexit doesn't make one a xenophobe, but I think we need to pay more attention to emotions and to people who exploit, especially populist demagogues, who exploit those fears. With regards to cosmopolitanism, the way I define it, or globalism, humanism, whatever, I think it all boils down to identity. Is identity a monolithic thing? Does it have to be like that? I am an Istanbulite. I'm attached to the Balkans, the Aegean, the Mediterranean, the Levant. I carry in my soul lots of elements from the Middle East. I'm a European by birth, by choice, the values that I uphold, and I became a Londoner over the years. Can I not have multiple belongings? Can I not be a world citizen at the same time? So I make a distinction between patriotism and nationalism. It is very not natural, very human to have a love for the country we come from, for the traditions we come from. These are beautiful things. But the moment it becomes an identity, a monolithic, exclusive identity based on us versus them, that's where the problem starts. And let us not be confident that we are over that stage, because sometimes it takes one financial crisis to trigger those old, nasty, historical emotions.
Yeah, just to clarify a few words, because the reason why we're struggling with the language you're using, it does not correspond to the changing reality that we live in. I think, first of all, liberalism. I mean, I would probably believe that I'm about as liberal as they come when it comes to basic values. And that, ironically, the EU, for example, is far more liberal, and the anti-populist movements tend to be far more illiberal than their opponents. There's a bit of an irony, because the Hungarian government calls itself an illiberal government. That's what they call themselves. And that's what they are, totally liberal. But then the people that criticize them often become just as illiberal as what they criticize, but from a different point of view. And I think that we do need to rethink what liberalism means. And liberalism does mean politics for different points of view. And liberalism also means an acknowledgement of the right of people to express themselves and their views in a way that corresponds to their humanity. I think that cosmopolitanism is an interesting word. I like the argument, right? And I like real cosmopolitanism. By cosmopolitanism, I mean the cosmopolitanism of Immanuel Kant, and about the cosmopolitanism of the Enlightenment, which actually understood the importance of human values. But these human values were seen as not somehow living in abstract, in separation from national realities, but as a kind of complementism. I think today what they call cosmopolitanism has become globalism, which is something very different. Because globalism has become a set of institutions that are detached from the experience of normal human beings. And I do think that that's really got to be understood. And finally, on democracy. You go to a bookshop today, you'll find that there are very few books written that praise democracy. There's very few books written about the joys and the importance of democracy. You'll find far more books written about the dangers of too much democracy, and far more books written about putting qualifications on democracy. And I do think that in the 21st century, unless we recapture the democratic essence and give meaning to democracy, because unless we have proper debate, proper discussion, unless people feel that their vote actually matters, you are going to end up with a lot of problems that we exist And the reason why we have those more extremist movements that none of us like in school is precisely because they know that their voices are ignored, and they know that their voices are not valued, and they know that no matter what they do, they will never make any difference to their society. And that's a condition that's been created by people who ought to have known better, who are, in a sense, running European societies.
Okay, great, thank you. So I'm going to try and get people in the back. With the microphone, sorry, the microphone's got 3 hands.
Good morning. You spoke at the beginning about the importance of language, and then we talked about the problems of duality. Could I make a suggestion that the battle of ideas is changed into something like the celebration of ideas, or the festival of ideas?
No. I mean, you can chat amongst yourselves about it, but we're not changing the name. Right, anyway, next along.
Alique, I'm glad that you mentioned the far right, because I'm thinking of an example recently. The Football Lads Alliance had a march in London against Islamic extremism and general extremism, and every single media publication reported it as a far right march. I supported them on Twitter because they were going to people like The Guardian, the usual suspects, saying, we are not far right as an organisation, we are the Football Lads Alliance, we are 30,000 men with very different political leanings. And every time we try and say something, working class white men in this country, we get called far right. So you're talking about, I can't remember your name again, gentleman there, about how when people's voices are not heard, they become extreme. Well, that's the perfect example. That's what's going on in this country right now. So if you comment on that, that'd be great.
That's interesting, thank you. And then the person there, yeah.
Hello, this is a minor point, but I think perhaps an important one. You said right at the beginning that you couldn't see Trump as anything but part of the financial elite. I want to point out that Trump is probably the only billionaire in America to ever step into a WWE wrestling ring. I think you'll probably find that 9 out of 10, if not more, of his fellow billionaires think that is a solid gold floor, is a height of happiness. Culturally, Trump's basically a working class guy who won billions in the lottery and not part of the culture of financial elite. Thank you.
Thank you, interesting. Now, can we get those, can we get them through?
Frank, I'm not sure I recognise your point about the national identity not being so important or not being or being seen as something that's bad, because the way that I would see it is that the problem that people perceive with Brexit, for example, is that it's against what Britain was best for Britain. Similarly, the way that they talk about Front National in France is that they're not French. So it strikes me that actually it's a way of recasting national identity as being something which is the global citizen and cosmopolitan. But at no point do I think that any of the elite, if you want to use that word, have an intentional design to get rid of the idea of being British. In fact, they seem to talk about it more than anything like
Okay, thanks.
I'm very nervous about the discussion about emotions, just because I think all of us will remember after the referendum happened. It was very much talked about in terms of an emotional response, an emotional flow, and how do we believe this very irrational, visceral thing that was aimless, and that's how people were motivated to do that. I think that actually the important thing that you might be missing is that populist movements are not necessarily emotional. It's not that we need to touch people's emotions, it's that we need to take people seriously politically. That's the key thing that's being missed in this country related to Brexit. Brexit is still not being taken seriously politically. So actually, I mean, most people would be hugely uninterested in being engaged on an emotional level, would be being taken seriously, having their intellect engaged with, whether that be a street sweeper or an academic, and taking their political ideas seriously. That's far more important than getting into consideration.
Okay.
Yeah, the previous speakers stole my thunder slide. I always want to make a point about emotion. Alec, you talked about that quite a bit. For me, the whole discussion about emotion is
It's just another way of disparaging people's legitimate ideas. It's really a way of putting them down. I think just a few weeks ago in Dublin, I think it was Guy Verhofstadt, the leading bureaucrat, who came out and described the Brexit vote as an emotional spasm. An emotional spasm. So there was nothing rational about it. It was illegitimate. That was his way of expressing his contempt for the people who had voted to leave the EU. And if we think back through the tradition of conservative thought, that was a mantra of those who opposed women's suffrage. Women were hysterical. Women were ruled by their emotions, and this is why they shouldn't be given the vote, because they could not be trusted to make rational decisions about the future of Britain and anywhere else. So there's a long tradition of disparaging ordinary people and their ideas and their aspirations through describing it as being based on emotions. I'm all in favour of passion. Really. Passion is a good thing. Emotion is a good thing. I'm passionate about lots of things because I have strong ideas and I think they're good and I think they're important and I think they're worth fighting for. But we shouldn't disparage people's legitimate and rational arguments through describing them as being based on emotion.
Okay, I'm just going to Ellen back in just on that, and then if you might come down now, I've got you, then that, and then
So I don't think at any point in my talk, in my previous speech, I used the word emotion in a negative way. Just the opposite. I use it in a very positive way. I'm a writer, I'm a storyteller, and what I do is, it's right, I write about emotions extensively. And let me clarify, allow me to clarify, I think as human beings, we all are emotional creatures. But the problem is we don't like to recognize it much. And being emotional intelligence is not the opposite of rational intelligence. As many studies have underlined, it's a combination of rational intelligence and the recognition of the importance of emotions, such as joy, anxiety, which we all share. So when I talk about emotions, it doesn't mean, oh, it's just an emotional, response. It's not like looking down upon. And in fact, there's no way of connecting with people, understanding their political needs and demands, without understanding also their emotions, because it's whole, it's together. So I think we use the word emotion in different ways. Allow me to give you small examples to clarify. I moved to the UK about 8 years ago, and at the time I used to think, whenever there's a political discussion, both around dinner tables and on TV, people in Britain are very controlled when we speak about politics. And that changed before the referendum and during the referendum. For the first time, I saw people becoming more passionate and getting angry at each other, even friends, even family members. I think this is an age in which there's more passion in politics. This can be good, this can be bad, so I'm not putting labels now.
Okay, thank you. Right, so, yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. I am a freelance good artist. I worked on and off for many years in international organizations, particularly for European Commission programs in Ukraine. And I can assure you, European Commission missions in Ukraine are certainly not being heavy laden. I once had a conversation with the EU political advisor in Moldova next door, talking about black victims before 1945. He wasn't aware that Kiev had been captured by the Germans during the Second World War. My question is, what kind of reaction, if any, have you been getting to your books from the extreme the extreme anyways, that Mr. Coulthard has referred to in the past? People like Chris Patton, Nick Clegg, the person who doesn't like being called Mrs. Clegg, and others. I frankly believe quite a few of these people are involved, and that is on a hereditary basis. They want to protect their children's future careers in responsible organisations.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, we've missed out you, sir, and then I'm going to take this lady in.
Hi, thanks. I think we've had a lot about right-wing populism and I'd be interested to hear a bit about left-wing populism and what next. And thinking about a little bit now myself, just this is something we want to get on. I think it's, you start with a rejection of oligarchs or technocrats, and I think that the thing which I find a bit scary about populism is that you move across the spectrum to demagoguery. And in the process you have a rejection of what is often necessary expertise. And the quote which most springs to mind is Michael Gove saying, I think we've got enough experts in the context of the Brexit debate. So I know someone's going to have expertise and maybe do that in this mission.
Okay, thanks. And then Dan, from you, please. Sorry, I don't think it's going to happen. I'll try. Right, okay. Yeah.
I think that some of the comments on emotion from the audience were sort of, unfortunately, guilty of exactly the sort of snobbery they were accusing Elif of making. I think whether you voted Brexit or Remain, your vote would have been as emotional as you're accusing the other side of being. The decision that we were asked to make was simply so enormous that we just would not have had the mental bandwidth to process all of the different factors that would allow us to rationally work out whether it was a good decision or a bad decision. So all of us are guilty of making emotional decisions, and I feel like some of the language that's been used as sort of against Elif saying, well, we're accusing the people who voted Brexit of being very emotional, is actually sort of unfair, because we all made a very emotional decision on that day, whether we voted Brexit or Remain.
Okay, thank you. Right, so the further up, in the middle, I'm pointing over. Yeah, you. Well, wait for, don't look at me. Yeah. Get the microphone, actually. Right, thank you.
Does the panel think that an uninformed or misinformed electorate is as a result of bad media or press, or as the fault, or is the fault of the electorate in sort of not challenging information or arguments? For example, a certain statistic on the side of a bus, or is it the fault of something else entirely?
Okay. I can't take anyone else, I'm sorry. I'm going to just, because I've got a very bad reputation for letting my panels go over time, even though I've warned everyone who's running panels to not do that. So I'm determined to at least the first one finish on time. Can I just raise a couple of points that I hope will come up throughout the weekend, but also if the panel wants to pick up on any of these points. I mean, I myself am not convinced. I know what people mean when they say, we shouldn't talk about people's emotions, but I'm not convinced by that. I actually feel as though one of the things that's happened is that technocracy, as it were, has brought rational arguments into debate. When people are sort of saying to me, you're being emotional, they usually mean I won't go along with their statistical graphs and so on and so forth. And it's kind of as though rationality has to take the form of a very kind of arid discussion. So I actually think that there's something in what Ella says about an inability of people to kind of read the situation at a deeper level. People actually look at politics through trying to understand people as data points, for example, and can't understand. I mean, there's just an inability. There has been an inability, it seems to me, by a lot of the ruling elites to grasp what anyone feels or thinks about anything. And they could do with a bit more emotional intelligence, a phrase I hate, but I mean, I can get the point of that. The other thing that's really struck me, both in relation to the discussion, is something, again, actually, Alec, you said, that people feel that their voices are being ignored. You said we don't want to build bottom-up organisations, to rebuild civil society and so on. But I think that the problem is that people do feel as though any attempt, and I think that example of the football lads was a really good one in relation to that. When people actually self-organise, unless they're self-organising with a kind of arts council grant or something handed down to them, with a tick box approach to diversity, people actually say, well, you're not the right kind of self-organisation. I mean, civil society has become a kind of set of NGOs funded by the elites to reproduce their thoughts back at themselves. And that's what happens. I go to events all the time where there's 25 organisations sitting in the room talking to each other, and they're all saying exactly the same things to each other, using the same jargon, funded by the same people, and all getting on really well, and pretending they don't know each other, and they're interchangeable. And then I say something, and then they look at me like as though a Martian has arrived, right? Who are you? Who funds you? I have to always say no one. I mean, but the point about it is, it's this very odd sort of thing. So I think that you've got to recognise is that the boiling frustration is that you're not allowed to build civil society from the bottom down in that kind, and that's where I think when people do it, guess what they say? It's if they see a civil society organisation building from the bottom that they don't know about, they say, oh my God, there's a populist group just taken off in East London we've got to worry about. Send the police in. And that's where I think you're slightly misunderstanding the kind of values row and why it takes the form it does. So, okay, that's my contribution. Okay, I'm going to ask now in reverse order. Give you a chance to kind of grasp. You know, just got a minute and a half each. Just kind of give us something moving forward, because we're going to have all weekend in which we can pull this apart. But with the speakers, what's your final thoughts on it?
There's lots of things to criticize in EU. There's lots of things to criticize in the way the elite have been ruling, and there's also things to criticize in the way civil society has been functioning or failing to function. But may I invite you to a dystopia, in which there is no functioning civil society. We can be very critical of the media and also media outlets, but may I invite you to think about another dystopia in which there is no media allowed at all. And that dystopia is being realized in some parts of the world as we're speaking today. My country is one of them, where the most of the media has been crushed and silenced. So yes, we can be critical of journalism, of how the media can distort something, but can you imagine what the lack of media, and the lack of academia, the lack of civil society can lead to? So there's a part of me that has huge respect for proper journalism, and I think it's going to become even more important to be able to make these distinctions between fact and fiction. And I'm saying this as a fiction writer. We've entered a very dangerous stage when anything can be said, and you don't have to prove it, you don't have to convince anyone with facts, you can just carry on because everyone has their own echo channels, and everyone follows their own media outlets. It is a massive challenge for all of us. How do we communicate across those ideological boundaries? Because if we can't, I am worried that, yes, populist models are going to benefit from this gap. With regards to fear, I remember throughout the Brexit campaign, this big road sign saying, the Turks are coming, 80 million of them, Turkey is joining the EU, so it's time for us to leave. Now, the people who put that sign up there knew that Turkey was not going to join the EU anytime soon. I'm not debating the Turkey-EU membership, I'm talking about something else. But they still, nonetheless, put that sign up there because it triggers something. It triggers an emotion. So when I talk about emotions, anxiety, I'm not saying only some people are experiencing this. We all do. Whatever we vote for, we are emotional creatures. And it's not a bad thing to talk about emotions. Lastly, I think we've entered a very liquid time, in world history where anything can change. Now we're talking about Catalonian independence, about Brits suppressing that, things that we wouldn't normally talk about 5 years ago. Things that we used to take for granted, we cannot take for granted anymore. And democracy is one of them. And therefore, we need to put more effort into it. We need more activism. We need more involvement from young people, from minorities, even when it comes to women's rights, LGBT rights, things that we think we're so over, we can go backwards really fast. And I think it's not a coincidence that when societies become more authoritarian, more populist, yes, more nationalist, the first thing that is bruised is women's rights. So in my opinion, this is a time when women have to become even more active, even more cognizant of what we can bruise. Because it's not like, okay, we are over that stage and we want those rights anymore. Everything is listed, and it's time for us to appreciate, yes, worry a little bit, and work together in those rights.
I think we are talking across each other to some extent, because I do think the issues in Britain and democracies are somewhat to the issues in Turkey or Russia or China. I mean, there is overlap too, but I think the Battle of Ideas is very much a creature of a rich little democracy in some ways, and its concerns are somewhat different to, I mean, Turkey is, as it were, a different sort of historical just stage to old democracy like UK, where I think actually, all things considered, I think we've displayed our political character rather than our political illness, that some will scream at what you might see it. Actually, we've re-involved in politics, we've re-involved ourselves in politics on with maybe groups that seem to not be participating, young people, the left behind working class who turned out and voted in the Brexit referendum in millions, and of course, predictions on what, and indeed, look at the way that because of our partner sovereignty, because of the flexibility of our common law and parliamentary traditions, we were able to handle the surge of nationalism so in a way that Spain is not able to handle the surge of nationalism, separatism from Catalonia. Having said that, clearly our parties began to sink with the new drivers of value politics today. But the fundamentals of politics remains about reconciling differences. But there are different kinds of differences which we have to reconcile our parties. I mean, how do we reconcile these differences in ways of time? The great task of modern politics is to create politics that respects the fundamental interests of both of these values. It's really things it's easier if you have one project or an enemy. You don't really have one enemy. The Brexit has divided us when put together. But my final point is just a brief comment on the whole. Obviously, there is objectivity, there is rational truth, but nobody decides on their politics by scanning the data. Everybody starts from emotions or values or intuition. And of course, the highly educated are not better at selecting the data that they are predisposed to want than ordinary people. That was the point, I think, the reasonable point that Michael Gove was making, that the experts, I don't mean experts who take your tube off your brain or keep your aeroplanes flying. I don't mean real experts in a hard time, but I mean all the kind of commentators, the social scientists, the economists. Of course, they all have their values. It is their values that drive their selection of the data. Just as much as it is for ordinary people. They are no different at all in that respect. But I think we should just remember that. Thank you.
Yeah, I slightly disagree with David. I think the highly educated, intelligent people are not any better than the rest of society at using their rationality or their emotions. All you got to do is listen to the Today program. And the question that comes up every single morning, more than once, is how do you feel? And the way in which emotion is being politicized is not by right-wing demagogues, but actually emotion is being politicized from above in the way that emotionalism becomes a prison, in which everything is interpreted on the BBC and various newspapers. And just think about the way in which every reality TV program, how do you feel? I'm gutted. Sort of the whole kind of exchange that occurs there. I think we've got to get a bit of a reality check here. I think that the key battle in the future is really about democracy. And I think that there's very few people in the political classes who take democracy seriously. They have not read their Machiavelli. When Machiavelli was asked the question, he made a very simple point. The first one to do in the Renaissance, that when it comes to making decisions, the wisdom of the many is far likely to lead to better outcomes than that of the individual or that of the experts. And I think that understanding that the people, we're not celebrating. The people have all kinds of problems, but having confidence in people is really an essential element of public life. The people talk about civic society, but civic society these days being part of the state, being funded by the state. I think a public sphere, where individuals make decisions about their future and encouraging that culture is what's really, really important. Finally, I'll have to come back to the politics of fear. But what I find disturbing about the politics of fear, and I do mean this genuinely, I'm completely squeezed between something that you said about your dystopia, which is just remember this dystopia, which is another way of saying, look at all the horrible things that happen, which in my book is a classical position of politics of fear. So you got that on the one hand, and you got the Trumpian, sort of America is not safe kind of argument. All of them praying about how bad things will get in the future. And I think the fact that everybody seems these days to be so readily, sort of trot out the dystopian future, so readily scare us into a particular position because unless we do something now, something terrible is going to happen. I think that kind of politics of fear, which abandons the politics of hope, is really what we're going to combat at the end of the day.
I still like to run over time. Right, anyway, okay. We didn't get round to answering the very interesting question on left-wing populism, which I think is very important and arguably explains everything from Corbyn and so on. But some quickly to note, Ellen is signing her book in the bookshop in the next half hour. David and Frank will be signing their book over lunchtime at 1:15. David is speaking on Footloose Cosmopolitans later in the day, so you can hear him again. Frank is off to speak on The Nation State Does It Matter. The Heart of the Press that's happening at 12 o'clock is on organ donation, presumed consent. I wasn't going anyway. And anyone who's going back here, we're on Diversity Does It Matter. Can we thank our panel once more? Great job.
X law through them. I don't know whether you want to just take two